Hello there. Sean Saylor here with Liongard. I want to thank you for swinging by to check us out. If you're familiar with this, hopefully you're going to learn some new things about what we've released in Liongard over the last year. And if you're new to us, well, then you're in for a special treat because we want to help your MSP standardize, secure, and scale with automation. And that's exactly what we're going to do today. So thanks for swinging by. Let's dive right in. Well, today you're probably managing all of your systems for your customers similar to this guy. This is a snapshot of a typical MSP and all of that surface area that you have to cover. Each of these systems has their own portal, their own reporting, and their own alerting, for instance, and you have to look at them customer by customer or tenant by tenant. On top of that, you may think that you have your business intelligence game in place, but then you find out that you have to plug each of these systems into that business intelligence solution or respectively to your PSA or documentation platforms. And you have to manage 20 different connections to keep up with it all, right? These systems, they all have different schemas, different ways to access them, like PowerShell, API, CLI, or SSH. And for instance, you have to figure all that stuff out. Now, why would you ever want to continue trying to do that manually? Well, for one, you don't want to sacrifice your profit along the way, and you need to be able to rely on accurate information on your customers with data that you can truly trust on those systems. Now, think about what you're doing now. You're asking your engineers, who are your most valuable resources, to keep up with this. You're asking them to be technical writers instead of problem solvers. And your best engineers, well, they're usually the world's worst at keeping up with all of this, and they equally hate trying to do it. There's just not enough cycles in the day to keep up with those mundane tasks. Now, on top of that, there's this mass explosion of new technologies that are coming to life in the cloud, network, and on premise, and you guys have to keep up with it all, right? You have to have visibility into those systems. And as you continue to grow and scale, that's why your team feels overwhelmed, stressed, and they can't keep up. Now, this is just one customer, for instance, but think about doing that collectively for 25, 50, 100, or a few hundred customers. Now that pain is exponential. Well, I want you to know that you don't have to settle for any of that nonsense anymore, thanks to advances in automation. Now, imagine having one solution that gives you that unified visibility, one place that's collecting all that data for you automatically, inspecting those systems every single day. Well, that's exactly what Liongard delivers. The ability for you as the MSP to standardize, secure, and scale with automation. Now, check this out. With one fell swoop, you just unified all those systems across the stack. Those systems that have different portals, different ways to access them, and different alerting. And you're bringing all that into one centralized location, Liongard, that feeds those other cool core tools that you're already using today, like your PSAs, your documentation platforms, and business intelligence solutions. And you're filling that with data that you can trust. Now, Liongard is designed to give you guys unified visibility into all those systems across the stack. It standardizes how those systems, the data from those systems is stored. And it lays the foundation for building stronger client relationships because this data is stored in a historical timeline, which allows you to do some powerful things with it, like document those systems every day with pure, pristine accuracy. And you have the ability to audit those systems for changes like what's added or taken away. Now, you also have the ability to secure those systems because you can standardize those configurations and harden them further. Now your team truly has data that they can trust in one unified place. Now let's dive in and have some fun into the app. Now, the goal of this session is to really dive into the data that Liongard collects and show you some ways that you can use it effectively. But before we dive in, I want to do a couple housekeeping things to make sure you understand some of the definitions of how we refer to things inside of Liongard. So each of your customers, for instance, so a customer in your PSA or an account, depending on if you're using certain PSAs, we call that an environment. And so we're able to sync in all of your environments directly from your PSA. If you're using ConnectWise Manage or Autotask, for example, those come right in. If you're using some of those documentation platforms, they may call it an organization and we can sync those right in as well. The systems that Liongard has visibility into are all the systems that we're inspecting in the cloud, network, and on-premise. So you'll see total systems, the alerts. Those are the things that we're finding in those systems that need your attention And then we have this discovery capability where an inspection of one system has the ability to discover that another system sits behind it, and you can inspect that specific system a little bit further. And you'll see on your environments page all of the customers listed here that you've synced in, and then you can see globally all of those systems really easily, so you can do cross customer reporting in a specific system really quickly. And I'll dive into that in just a minute. Now, let's take a look at some example systems and dive into this data a little bit further. So first and foremost, let's look at an example system like Active Directory. Well, Active Directory is one of the systems that we have that is inspected from a single on-premise agent. So one agent inspects all of your on-premise systems, all of that stuff that sits behind a firewall, like your Windows servers, Linux servers. It does a network discovery, your SQL servers, all of that stuff from one system. Now, Active Directory being a core part of what you're supporting, if the customer does have on-premise servers, you'll have some deep visibility into things like your users. So deep user information, are they privileged or not? And all of the data inside of Liongard is filterable, searchable, sortable, reportable, and exportable. Okay, I can see the last time they logged in, last time they changed their password, and group membership. Now, all of this data are defined in what we refer to as a data print. So let's dive into that just a little bit so that you understand. The data print is stored in a JSON structure, and we can get very granular into something that we call a metric. Now, these metrics are the most powerful part of Liongard because you have the ability to capture and track changes against those metrics. You can report on those metrics, and you can be alerted on certain things that don't meet your standard thresholds. So for instance, if I wanted to look at all of my users, right, whether they're privileged or not, that is a metric. Okay. Now, this data is stored in a historical timeline. So this timeline allows you to rewind back in time for up to a year. Okay, so the goal of this session is not to dive into all of the features and functionality of Liongard, but we want to make sure that you understand how we collect this data and how you can use it effectively. Now, inside of those metrics, okay, so there are defined metrics from Liongard. So if I look at just Active Directory alone, there are several MSPs globally that have contributed to this platform. So you get to leverage the mindset of the best of the best. So if I look at just metrics for Active Directory that you can quickly get some visibility into. So for instance, the count of joined computers, right? The privileged users count, or maybe you want a list of who those users are in a system. That is a metric. And once you have enabled a metric, it becomes accessible in all of the other screens, and you can capture and track changes against that metric. Now, these metrics also drive something that we call actionable alerts. Now, what's nice about these actionable alerts is we're not forcing your users to go to yet another screen or another system to get alerted for things that need their attention. They can actually work in the same place that they're already working today. So for instance, if they're working in ConnectWise Manage, or if they're using another PSA like Autotask, they have the ability to receive those alerts right on the service board of their choice. So let's take a look at a couple metrics in Active Directory. Well, there are, let's take a look here. If I just wanted to look at the ones developed by Liongard, so there's 40 Active Directory metrics built in already. Now, the beautiful thing is, I'm sorry, alerts that are built in. Now, the beautiful thing is that as long as the data is inside of Liongard, you have the ability to create a metric on anything, okay? So for instance, if I wanted to look at the changes that are taking place in Active Directory, perhaps I want to see who my privileged users were changed to. So if somebody is added or removed, I can send a ticket right into my PSA and know exactly who was added or removed when it was added or removed. Now, what if there's a new user added or a new device added? Whatever the case may be, you have the ability to track all of that information. Okay, there's several different use cases on ongoing service desk management that you want to keep track of those types of changes. Okay, now What if I have several instances of Active Directory that I'm managing across all of my customers, whether I'm managing 50 customers or 100 customers? Well, I can simply go to my global view. I can go into a specific system like Active Directory. Now imagine, now this is just a sandbox, but imagine I have several different instances of Active Directory. Okay, I can report really rapidly who are my privileged users in there, how many computers are associated with it, how many privileged users. If I see an instance of Active Directory with a whole slew of privileged users, I'm going to hone in on that and know that I've got a problem, because you don't want too many chefs in the kitchen. Now I can define which metrics I want to see. So maybe I want to add a server on there, the server count, right? I can see that information. I can add that as a metric, but I also have the ability to change these views and reorder these this data in any way that I want. And all this data is filterable, searchable, sortable, reportable, and exportable. Okay. So we talked about Active Directory, but let's dive into some other fun ones that I know that you guys are probably using today. Many of you are cloud solution providers, CSP partners, whether you're working with Microsoft directly or indirectly, you have the ability to get deep visibility into all of your Office 365 tenants. What's nice about the integration with Liongard and your 365 CSP portal is it's a one-time setup, and it gives you visibility into all of the tenants that you support. So it takes about 15 minutes to set it up, and all of the tenants that you support are automatically discovered, and you can inspect and document those systems in depth. Okay. It works the same way with several of our other inspectors as well. But with Liongard's integration into Office 365, now you've got deep visibility into things like, is AD Connect enabled? If so, when is the last time it's synced? I've got visibility into my licensing, how many are active versus assigned. Wouldn't it be nice to know with a metric inside of Liongard if I have some unused licenses? So think about, I've got that metric, that data inside of Liongard. I can be alerted when there's an unused license so that I'm not leaking money. If you're managing hundreds or thousands of tenants, you can easily leak tons of money as a managed service provider on licensing alone. And it'll take you months and sometimes years to recoup that money, because the margin is so thin on those licensing as it is. Now, I can see which users have which licensing. I can have a deep visibility into my users, including if they have multi-factor authentication enabled or not, right? I can see whether they're active or not, right? Sometimes the customers have termination events, but they forget to tell you about it, for instance, okay? Now, I can see roles, groups, mailbox thresholds, Microsoft Secure Score information. All of the data that makes up these tables inside of Liongard are driven by those metrics, again, that are in our data print. And I can pick any metric I want and create a change notification against it or an alert against it. So let's take a look at some of those metrics for Office 365, right? So if I go into Office 365, there are several built-in metrics that have been inspired by other MSPs that are already leveraging Liongard's automation to be more effective. Over 130 as of the time of this recording. So when I enable this metric, it becomes accessible at the individual customer screen, the system screen, and if I'm using any of those business intelligence solutions like BrightGauge, for instance, when I've enabled this metric, that metric becomes accessible in those other dashboard reporting platforms, because we have a REST API that those platforms are able to call, right? So however you want to consume the data, Liongard is that centralized source to bring the data in, and you can visualize it or see it in any of your other platforms. Now, the other thing that I want to look at is some of the alerts related to Office 365. Well, there are several different alerts that are built in to Liongard by default, nearly 40 for Office 365 alone. So a couple that I like to highlight that are very powerful for MSPs that are managing multiple Office 365 tenants. So for one, if somebody becomes a privileged user in Office 365, I want to know who that was and when it happened, because bad things can happen. Well, if a new user is added or a licensing is added or changed, I want to know, I want to have a full audit trail of those types of things, and Liongard is going to help you guys stay in front of that. But in a system like 365, your users are always your weakest link. So you can put some rules in place to help prevent anybody from clicking on a phishing email and that spiraling out of control. If you're managing hundreds or thousands of different tenants, right, depending on the size of your practice, right, it becomes very time consuming to go around to all those tenants to see if somebody has created a forwarding rule that's given that malicious actor a copy of everything sent and received to some bogus outside Gmail address. Well, Liongard's automation has the ability to see if this took place in one of your 365 tenants. So think of it as an extension of your team. Okay. So for instance, Liongard inspects Microsoft's Graph API and pulls in this data, and we can determine through automation if that has taken place. And we can alert you in the place where your team is already working. They don't have to go to Liongard to get this alert. It goes to the service board of your choice if you're using ConnectWise Manage, or if you're using another PSA like Autotask, for instance. It all works the exact same way. So now you are being a more effective MSP, leveraging automation instead of bodies to try to keep up with all of this. Okay. So what about if I'm managing several different 365 tenants and I wanted to look at all of my tenants for certain metrics that matter to me? Well, I can go to my systems view, and now I can see those metrics really rapidly across all of those 365 tenants. So imagine I've got hundreds of tenants here that I want to look at, and I want to look at some specific metrics that matter to me on how I run my practice. I simply select those metrics, and now the data inside of Liongard on this screen becomes filterable, searchable, sortable, reportable, and exportable. Okay, again, all of this data are simply metrics, and those same metrics, they land also in those reporting platforms, like if you're using BrightGauge, for instance. Okay, now a lot of times we get asked questions like, how is Liongard different than our remote monitoring and management solutions? Okay, so I want to be very clear. You still need your remote monitoring and management solutions because it's like taking your pulse on those systems. Okay, but when you look at that data that comes back for a Windows server, for instance, what you'll notice is that that data only has about 6 to 9 pieces of high level information. Well, Liongard is more like an MRI. Okay, so I'm going to go into an example server here. Liongard is going to give you deep visibility into the configuration of that server. So I can see the role of the server. I can see IP address information. If that IP address ever changes, Liongard is going to detect that and automatically update that in our timeline, right? What are the hardware details? What about drives, shares, printers? What about from an auditing standpoint, which users have access to that server? Okay, so you have a complete historical audit trail of all of the user details, whether they're directory users or if somebody has created a local user or a backdoor, right? That's simply a metric that shows up in our data print. Okay, and you have deep visibility into there. You've got roles, groups, software installed, a run-in history of all the software installed. If you want to filter and search for a specific type of software on your customer server, you can do that right here. Scheduled task running on there. What about network configuration? Is there something opened that shouldn't be? What about patches? Sometimes the RMM solutions will happily push a patch to your server, but then you find out the hard way that it did not successfully install. Well, you can report on failed patches. So for instance, if there was anything that required a reboot or whatever the case may be, or a patch needs to be reinstalled, you're going to have that visibility into your customer's environment. Okay, so again, all of this data is stored on a historical timeline. You have the ability to rewind back in time for up to a year, and we're also capturing and tracking those changes. Now, the same thing applies to servers like SQL, right? So SQL, you'll have deep visibility into your customers' database servers. If you are managing any third-party applications, you need to have visibility into the backend database, and most commonly that is SQL. So Liongard is going to give you deep visibility into SQL. Okay, if your customers are doing that and you're on the hook for supporting those servers, you better have some visibility into what's going on there. So if you'll see here on my screen, all of these systems, we're inspecting them, we're documenting them, we're capturing and tracking changes in those systems, we're reporting on those metrics that matter to you, we're alerting on the things that need your attention before bad things happen. So we want to help you get in front of those things happening. So think of us as a pre-breach solution, giving you visibility, or when there is an event, because inevitably events can still occur, you need to have a full audit trail of what's taking place in there. And Liongard is designed to give you guys that visibility. Now, I want to close out with one other system that I think is very important, especially in today's remote work from home world. Okay, so one of the most highly adopted systems that we've rolled out over the last year is Azure Active Directory. So think about those customers that you're supporting that are using completely serverless environments. Azure Active Directory is a way for you guys to have some control over those endpoints. So we built an integration to Azure Active Directory, and we're going to bring that information right into one centralized place and give you that visibility. Okay, so let's look here at Azure Active Directory. So in Azure Active Directory, I'm going to have some visibility into whether directory sync is enabled or not. I've got some user summary data here on my overview screen. I can see application sign-ins over the last 7 days. I can see any associated tenant domains to that Azure AD. But now at the user level, I showed you users at the 365 level. Well, at the Azure AD level, that gets even more granular. So I can see if the account's enabled or not, if multi-factor authentication is enabled or not. There's several different columns of information that we're pulling in from Microsoft's Graph API. Okay, now what about groups? I've got visibility into those as well. Okay, I've also got administrative roles. Okay, and audit logs. Okay, now you have the ability to see user sign-ins over a year-long period, right? If users are logging in from odd remote locations around the world or not in the places where they should be. So for instance, if you've got everybody that's supposed to be for this company should be logging in from Houston, Texas, and you notice that there's one oddball, that could be a sign that that person's account could have been compromised, right? And maybe you want to investigate further, or maybe that is okay. You can create alerts around those metrics with Azure AD as well. Now, if you're leveraging Intune, and we're starting to see an uptick in some of the trends in MSPs leveraging Intune to complement what they're doing with their RMM. So giving them even more control on those remote devices as well. You've got Intune in here that you can enable. If Intune is in use, you enable it during the setup. There's a little toggle that you turn on for that customer. If it's not in use, you simply turn that off. You leave the data out. You can see the devices that are out there, all that information. And again, inside of Liongard, there are going to be Azure AD, Active Directory, right? There's 24 metrics associated with Azure Active Directory that you can enable, and you can see those on multiple screens inside of Liongard. You can capture and track changes on those metrics as well. You can alert on those metrics, okay? So if I wanted to look at, for instance, Azure AD, let's go over here. So Azure, let me see here. Let me clear this out here. Azure Active Directory, right? There's 6 built-in alerts, but you have the ability in all of our systems to create your own custom alerts. You simply use our rule builder, and it inspects that data print that I showed you guys a little while ago, and you can be alerted on anything inside of Liongard. Okay, so think about the power of doing that for all of these systems. Okay, again, For all of these systems, we're inspecting them, we're documenting them, capturing and tracking changes in them, reporting on the metrics that matter to you, and continuously alerting you on things that need your attention. So instead of using those one-time assessment tools, how about assessing these systems on a daily basis, leveraging automation? And again, all this data can land right in the place where your team's already working. Now, I want to wrap up here with one more thing for your customers. Okay, so if you've got these metrics defined for those systems that you're supporting, you can go into an individual customer and now you can see a summary view of those key pieces of information in our customer overview screen. Now, in this customer overview screen, I'm going to have visibility into those, let's say, top 10 metrics that I want from each of those systems that I'm supporting in the cloud, network, on-premise apps and services, and those endpoints. And by the way, I briefly mentioned the RMMs. We've started building integrations into those RMM solutions because we want to bring in that endpoint data as well, again, into that centralized location and give you that historical context, okay? Now, in here, I have a 90-day look back at any critical changes that are taking place in those systems. Anything added will be highlighted in green. Anything deleted will be highlighted in red. And I also can see any of those alerts that I still need to be have addressed. And I can also see any of the things that I have addressed. Now, with our full loop ticket integration with ConnectWise managed, as an example, those alerts are worked in the place where your team is already working, right inside of the service board inside of ConnectWise. Now, for time's sake today, I'm not going to show that integration, but I want to encourage you guys, if you're leveraging ConnectWise Manage, if you'd like to see that integration, that full loop ticket integration, schedule a one-to-one demo with one of our teams. Now, using those metrics, again, a metric is a specific piece of information that I want to get to really rapidly in a system, but I don't want to spend 5 or 10 minutes logging into that system. I need it all right at my fingertips, okay? Well, you have a time lapse comparison screen now inside of Liongard as well. So I can pick any 2 dates of my choice and have meaningful conversations with my customers. So you're starting to notice Liongard can be leveraged in all parts of the customer journey, from sales to onboarding to ongoing service desk management, account management, and even the folks in billing, right? You need to have those metrics to have those meaningful conversations and properly bill your customers as well. So for instance, if I pick any 2 dates, beginning of the quarter, end of the quarter, whatever the case may be, I can start to see some trends like Active Directory privileged users list, right? On the far left here, the column that I'm showing is the latest thing. So I can see at one point this year, they had more than what my preferred privileged users are in the system. I've got those users out. Liongard automatically tracked that for me as well. I can see all of the active computer names that are in my network. I can see if there are a list of users that are stale or not. So I can have a meaningful conversation with my customer about Megan. Well, we noticed earlier this year, we asked about Megan Bowen. She came up again in our last meeting, but here she still is. Does she work with you anymore, Mr. Customer? And if not, we need to go ahead and disable her account or completely remove that from the system because her account is still active. It's no longer in use, but it's still active and they become a target for brute force attacks. You don't want that kind of stuff to happen. Now, for the folks that are using ConnectWise Manage as well for billing purposes, guess what we've got? Leveraging that metrics capability, you've got a bill and review feature. Now, this is nice for all of those non-technical accounting resources to have deep visibility into what you're billing your customers versus what those systems are actually reporting. So Liongard inspects those systems for you automatically, brings those metrics in, and now you have a side-by-side comparison of what you're billing versus what the system actually shows, and you can quickly identify any discrepancies. So for instance, I see a system here that has Office 365, E5. I can stretch these out if I want. I've got 8 licenses that I am billing my customer, but Liongard sees Microsoft's billing me for 9. Well, guess what? I'm under billing that customer. I'm certainly leaking money, and I'm going to have that awkward conversation with them about why I haven't been billing them properly, right? No MSP wants to go through that. It's all about that customer service experience, right? And you don't want your accounting resource to have to go shoulder tap or hunt down your level 3 tech to go get them this information once a month. That's not a good use of either one of their times, right? Time is money, right? You got to manage more with less, and you need to be able to use the data that Liongard is bringing in to effectively manage those systems more effectively. Our mission is to help you operate at a 10x capacity, and we want you to leverage automation to do that. If you're still trying to keep up with all these different things manually, you're working like MSPs did last decade, okay? It's time to automate as much as you can, be more effective, grow and scale through automation. So I want to encourage you all to schedule a one-to-one demo with one of our awesome regional sales managers, and they're going to go through a tailored demo leveraging Liongard with your existing technology stack. So whether you're using ConnectWise Manage, or you're Auto Task Shop, or you're using some documentation platform like IT Glue, we're going to help you understand how this data can land in those platforms and that you can use it to be a more effective MSP. Thanks for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed the session today, and help us spread the word. Visit liongard.com, schedule your meeting today to learn some more.